Some homes are loud long before anyone raises their voice. The air itself carries warning, a certain stillness before a door closes too hard, a certain quiet that isn't peace but preparation. A child raised inside that atmosphere learns to read anger the way sailors read weather, instinctively, urgently, long before the storm arrives. Years later, the storm may be gone, but the watching never quite stops. This is the story of what it means to grow up bracing, and what it takes to finally exhale. The body that never stopped listening. Long before they can explain it, children who grow up around constant anger develop a second sense, an almost animal awareness of shifting moods. A car door closing a little too firmly, a sigh held a beat too long, a silence that isn't calm but coiled. These small signals become a private language, one the child learns fluently because their safety depends on the translation. This hyper-attunement doesn't fade when the child leaves the house. It travels with them, quietly reshaping how they move through the world. As adults, they often notice themselves scanning a room within seconds of entering it, gauging tone, tension, the emotional temperature of everyone present. They can sense a shift in someone's mood before that person has even fully registered it themselves. They also become remarkably good at de-escalation, cracking a joke at just the right moment, changing the subject before an argument builds, softening their own voice instinctively when someone else's rises. These aren't just personality traits, they're survival skills, honed in rooms where conflict once meant danger, refined over years of practice no child should have had to have. But this vigilance comes at a cost. The nervous system that learns to brace rarely learns how to fully relax. Even in calm environments, a part of them stays on alert, waiting, almost superstitiously, for the peace to break. Silence can feel suspicious rather than safe. Kindness can feel like the quiet before something shifts. This is often the first sign these adults recognize, once they slow down enough to notice it. An exhaustion that has no obvious cause, a restlessness in rooms that are, by every measure, safe. Not because anything is currently wrong, but because their body was trained, early and thoroughly, to never quite believe that. Naming this isn't self-pity. It's the first honest look at a pattern that has quietly run in the background for years, steering choices, relationships, and reactions long before it was ever understood. Where the anger came from, and where it went anger, in a household, is rarely just anger. It is often the visible edge of something deeper: stress, unresolved trauma, financial strain, addiction, or a parent's own unspoken grief, all channeled through the one emotion that felt permissible to express. Many parents who raised their children inside constant tension were never taught how to feel anything except anger. Sadness may have been mocked in their own childhoods. Fear may have been punished. Anger, though, was tolerated, even normalized, because it masked vulnerability with control. So the anger became the household's dominant language, spoken loudly and often, while every other emotion stayed silent beneath it. For the child living inside this pattern, the unpredictability is often more damaging than the anger itself. A predictable environment, even a difficult one, allows a child's nervous system to adapt and settle. But when anger arrives without warning, one day dismissed as nothing, the next erupting without an obvious trigger, the child's mind can never fully relax. They learn to treat every interaction as potentially volatile, because sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't, and there's no reliable way to know which it will be until it's already happening. Children in these environments often take on quiet, invisible roles. Some become the peacemaker, absorbing tension to keep the household calm. Others become nearly invisible, learning that the safest place is the one no one notices. Some become achievers, believing that if they're just good enough, successful enough, agreeable enough, the anger will finally have no reason to arrive. None of these roles are conscious choices. They are adaptations, formed the same way a plant bends toward available light, not out of desire, but necessity. And beneath all of it lives a quiet, persistent belief, absorbed rather than taught. Conflict is dangerous, and I am responsible for preventing it. This belief rarely stays confined to childhood. It follows the child into every future relationship, every workplace, every quiet disagreement that suddenly feels, inexplicably, like too much. How chronic tension rewires the mind. From a neurological standpoint, a child raised in an unpredictable, anger-filled environment experiences something researchers call toxic stress, a prolonged activation of the body's threat response system without the buffering presence of consistent safety. Under normal circumstances, a child's stress response, governed largely by the amygdala, is meant to activate briefly and then settle, especially with the help of a calm caregiver. But in homes where anger is frequent and unpredictable, that system rarely gets the chance to fully stand down. Over time, this chronic activation can lower the threshold for what the brain perceives as threatening. Psychologists describe this as hypervigilance, a heightened, persistent state of alertness that continues long after the original danger has passed. This is why many adults who grew up around constant anger report feeling anxious in objectively calm situations, or bracing for conflict in conversations that were never headed there. Research on childhood stress also points to changes in emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for managing impulses and calming emotional reactions, develops most effectively in environments of safety and predictability. When that safety is inconsistent, the nervous system often defaults to more reactive, instinct-driven responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, even in adulthood, even in situations that don't warrant them. This also explains a common but often confusing adult pattern: a strong discomfort with other people's anger, paired with an equally strong discomfort expressing their own. Having grown up on the receiving end of unpredictable outbursts, many of these individuals unconsciously equate anger, even their own, with danger. So instead of expressing frustration, they suppress it, sometimes for so long that it surfaces later as irritability, anxiety, or sudden emotional exhaustion they can't quite explain. None of these responses reflect weakness. They reflect a nervous system that adapted, with remarkable precision, to an environment that demanded constant readiness. The tragedy isn't the adaptation, it's that the environment required it in the first place. Learning that the storm has passed healing from a childhood shaped by constant anger often begins with a moment of dissonance, a peaceful relationship that starts to feel, confusingly, uncomfortable. A partner who never raises their voice, and yet the old bracing still happens anyway. A calm conversation that somehow still triggers the instinct to prepare for impact. This is usually the first real signal. The storm has passed, but the body hasn't been told yet. The turning point tends to arrive slowly, through repeated evidence that safety can be trusted. A friend who stays steady during a disagreement instead of escalating it. A therapist who helps name the specific bodily sensations of hypervigilance, the tight chest, the shallow breath, so they can finally be recognized as memory, not present danger. A quiet, repeated realization: this isn't that house, this isn't back then. Healing here often means learning to tolerate calm, something that sounds simple but rarely is. For someone raised amid unpredictability, peace can initially feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. Part of the work is teaching the nervous system, gradually and patiently, that stillness doesn't have to be followed by an eruption. That kindness can simply be kindness, without a hidden cost. It also means learning to express anger, rather than suppress or fear it. Many of these individuals discover, often with surprise, that mild frustration or disagreement doesn't have to escalate, that it's possible to say, "This bothers me," without the room tilting into crisis. Relearning this is slow, often uncomfortable, but profoundly freeing. Over time, the constant scanning begins to soften, not because vigilance was wrong, it once kept them safe, but because it is no longer required in the same way. The nervous system, given enough repeated safety, begins to recalibrate. Rooms start to feel like rooms again, not minefields. This is the quiet turning point, not the absence of old instincts, but the growing ability to notice them, thank them for their service, and gently choose differently. The quiet after the noise. There is a particular kind of peace available only to those who once lived without it, a peace that isn't taken for granted, because it was never guaranteed. Learning to trust stillness, after years of bracing for noise, is not weakness. It is one of the most quietly courageous things a person can do. The anger you grew up around was never a reflection of your worth. It was the sound of someone else's pain, spoken in the only language they knew. You were simply standing too close to hear it. Now, slowly, the listening can change. Not the listening for danger, but a new kind, softer, aimed inward. Listening for what you actually feel, rather than what you must prepare for. And in that quiet, something long overdue becomes possible. Not the absence of storms, but the certainty, finally, that you no longer have to face them alone.